Jack the Ripper, London. In 1888, the foggy alleys of Whitechapel in London became haunted by an unknown killer who came to be called Jack the Ripper. He preyed on women, often prostitutes, and his brutal methods, throats slit, bodies mutilated, terrified the entire city. Newspapers spread panic with every new discovery, and the Ripper's taunting letters to the police deepened the horror. Despite massive investigations, his identity was never uncovered. Jack the Ripper was never caught, his legend becoming one of history's most chilling unsolved mysteries. H. Holmes, Chicago. During the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, a strange hotel stood near the bustling city streets. Its owner, Dr. H. Holmes, had designed it with hidden rooms, secret passages, and soundproof chambers. Known as the Murder Castle, it became a trap for unsuspecting victims, lured in by Holmes' charm. He is believed to have killed dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people inside. Holmes was arrested in 1894, confessed to 27 murders, and was executed by hanging in 1896. Ted Bundy, Washington. In the 1970s, women across Washington and nearby states began to vanish. Behind the disappearances was a charming law student, Ted Bundy. He lured victims by pretending to be injured, asking for help, then overpowering them. His crimes shocked the nation as he confessed to killing more than 30 women. Bundy's intelligence and confidence made him a terrifying figure, often described as the face of pure evil. Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair in Florida on January 24, 1989. Jeffrey Dahmer, Milwaukee. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the city of Milwaukee uncovered horrors inside Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. Known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, he lured men with promises of money or companionship, only to drug, kill, and dismember them. The shocking part of his crimes was his obsession with preserving body parts and even practicing cannibalism. Police discovered skulls, bones, and chilling photographs inside his home. Dahmer was sentenced to life in prison but was beaten to death by a fellow inmate in 1994. John Wayne Gacy, Chicago. Beneath the smiling mask of a clown, he hid unthinkable evil. In the 1970s, he performed at children's parties as Pogo the Clown, but his home concealed a nightmare. Gacy lured young men with promises of work, then strangled them and buried their bodies in the crawl space under his house. Investigators uncovered 29 bodies in his property. Gacy was convicted and executed by lethal injection in 1994. Anatoly Onoprienko, Ukraine. April 1996. Police in western Ukraine swarmed a small village house and let out a quiet, stocky man who had terrorized the country for years. Anatoly Onoprienko had been moving from town to town, blasting his way into homes at night, massacring entire families, parents, children, even infants, and then torching the scenes to erase evidence. He favored a shotgun, often returning to the bodies to ensure no survivors. Investigators later tied him to highway ambushes and house invasions from 1989 to 1996, a rolling nightmare that left rural communities sleeping with lights on and shotguns by the door. In custody, Onoprienko coolly confessed to 52 murders, describing methodical hunts and random selection to throw off police. In 2013, the Beast of Ukraine died behind bars of heart failure, leaving only charred case files and grief in his wake. Elizabeth Bathory, Cactus. December 1610. At night, Hungarian guards entered Cactus Castle, home of Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Inside, they said they found a terrible scene: hurt servants, hidden rooms, and young girls who were promised jobs but instead were beaten, tortured, or left to die. Later, stories spread that Elizabeth bathed in blood to stay young. Records and witness reports said she may have killed many victims, some say dozens, others say hundreds. But some historians believe these stories were made bigger than the truth, maybe because powerful people wanted to bring her down. Her helpers were put on trial and executed, but Elizabeth herself never faced a real trial. Instead, she was locked in her own castle, with walls built around her rooms, until she died in 1614. Today, people still remember her name as a symbol of cruel nobility, and her castle remains a place of fear. Albert Fish, New York. 1928. In New York, Albert Fish lured 10-year-old Grace Budd away from her home, telling her family he would give her work. She never returned. Before that crime, Fish had already been suspected in the disappearances of other children, but there was never enough proof. He was known as a quiet old man. After Grace's disappearance, her family received a horrifying letter in 1934, where Fish described in chilling detail how he had killed and even eaten parts of her. The police finally had evidence. He was arrested in December 1934 and later confessed to several more killings. At his trial, doctors described him as a sadist with uncontrollable urges. Fish was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. 1936, at his execution, witnesses said the electric chair sparked and jolted more than once. His death closed one of the darkest chapters in New York's history. Richard Ramirez, Los Angeles. 1984, Los Angeles fell into fear when Richard Ramirez, later called the Night Stalker, began breaking into homes at night. His attacks were brutal: murder, assault, and satanic markings left behind at the scenes. For more than a year, he moved through California undetected, choosing victims of all ages. He often left behind signs of devil worship, like pentagrams, which added to the terror. People began locking their doors and windows at all times, but Ramirez always found a way in. Finally, in August 1985, a fingerprint from a stolen car led police straight to him. His face was shown on TV and newspapers. The very next day, people in East Los Angeles recognized him on the street. A mob of citizens chased him, beat him, and held him until police arrived. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. 2013, Ramirez died of cancer on death row, leaving many feeling robbed of justice. Aileen Wuornos, Florida. 1989, Florida highways became the backdrop of Aileen Wuornos' crimes. Over the span of a year, she shot and killed 7 men. Wuornos claimed it was self-defense against clients who tried to harm her, but her confessions told a darker story. Her troubled past was revealed during investigations. She had been abandoned as a child, lived on the streets, and turned to prostitution to survive. Police found her victims' abandoned cars and eventually connected the cases through ballistic evidence. In January 1991, Wuornos was arrested in a biker bar. She at first denied everything, but soon gave detailed confessions on tape, saying she hated men and wanted revenge. Her close friend even testified against her in exchange for immunity. In 1992, she was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. The media followed her story closely, and later her life was made into the Oscar-winning movie Monster. 2002, at 46, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Her final words promised she would return with Jesus, like Independence Day. Even in death, she left behind only fear. Ed Gein, Plainfield, 1957, in Plainfield, Wisconsin, police entered the farmhouse of Ed Gein after a local store owner went missing. Inside, they uncovered one of the most disturbing crime scenes in American history. The house was filled with human body parts. Investigators found chairs made of skin, bowls crafted from skulls, and masks sewn from faces. Gein admitted to digging up graves and using corpses for his projects. Though he killed only 2 confirmed victims, his gruesome crimes inspired horror movies like Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He was declared insane and sent to a mental institution instead of prison. Doctors said he lived in a fantasy world, obsessed with his strict mother and disturbed by women. 1984, after spending decades in psychiatric care, Gein died in the hospital. Even after death, his name remained linked forever to horror. Pedro Lopez, Colombia. 1980, in Colombia, Pedro Lopez, later called the Monster of the Andes, was arrested for the disappearance of young girls. Police at first didn't believe him, but what he confessed was beyond imagination. Lopez admitted to killing more than 300 girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. He said he preyed on the poor and vulnerable, often promising gifts or work before luring them away. Mass graves were later found, proving his story. In 1980, he was convicted of 110 murders in Ecuador but was released after just 14 years because of local laws. Later, he was deported to Colombia, where he was declared insane and put in a psychiatric hospital. 1998, he was released once again, and after that, his whereabouts became unknown. Alexander Pichushkin, Moscow. June 16, 2006, police in Moscow finally arrested Alexander Pichushkin, who later became known as the chessboard killer. For years, he had been walking the paths of Bitsa Park, looking for lonely men who could be lured with a simple offer of vodka. Once he gained their trust, he would lead them deeper into the park and suddenly attack them, usually striking the back of their head with a hammer. Many of the bodies were hidden in sewers or buried in the woods, making it difficult for police to find them. Pichushkin confessed to killing 49 people, but he proudly claimed his true goal was 64 murders, the same number of squares on a chessboard. His crimes stretched over 14 years, from 1992 until his arrest in 2006. At trial, he shocked the court by demanding that more of his victims be officially counted because he wanted them remembered. He received a life sentence, with the first 15 years to be spent in strict solitary confinement. Now locked away behind bulletproof glass in a remote Russian prison, Pichushkin remains a frightening example of how an ordinary-looking man can carry out unimaginable violence. Robert Hansen, Anchorage. October 27, 1983, police in Anchorage arrested Robert Hansen, a man who outwardly appeared to be nothing more than a quiet and hard-working baker. But for more than a decade, he had lived a secret life of cruelty. From the early 1970s into the 1980s, Hansen kidnapped women, often sex workers or dancers, and forced them onto his private plane. He flew them into the lonely forests of Alaska, released them into the wilderness, and then hunted them down like prey with a rifle and knife. Investigators later uncovered at least 17 murders, though some believe he may have killed as many many as 37 women. Hansen collected jewelry from his victims as trophies and buried their bodies in hidden graves scattered across the wild. His capture came only after one woman managed to escape and alert police. In court, Hansen confessed and even guided investigators to grave sites. He was sentenced to 461 years in prison, ensuring he would never be released. He died in 2014 behind bars. David Berkowitz, New York. 1976, New York City was thrown into panic as women were shot at random by a man calling himself the Son of Sam. Over a year, David Berkowitz killed 6 people and wounded 7 more. He wrote taunting letters to the police and media, signing them Son of Sam, which spread fear even further. Couples stopped going out at night, and the city lived under constant tension. Finally, police tracked him through a parking ticket given near one of the shooting scenes. When they searched his car, they found a gun, maps, and a chilling confession letter. In 1978, Berkowitz was sentenced to 6 life terms in prison. Later, he claimed a demon dog told him to kill, but psychologists said he was mentally ill, not possessed. He is still alive, serving his sentence in prison, calling himself a born-again Christian. Andrei Chikatilo, Rostov. 1978, in Russia, Andrei Chikatilo began a killing spree that lasted over a decade. His victims were often children and young women, whom he lured with promises of food or money. Police struggled to solve the crimes. In Soviet Russia, authorities didn't want to admit a serial killer existed, so the investigation was slowed. Still, bodies kept appearing, over 50 victims in total. Chikatilo was finally caught in 1990 after suspicious behavior near a train station. He later confessed in horrifying detail, describing how he killed and mutilated his victims. In 1992, he was convicted of 52 murders, though the real number may have been higher. 1994, he was executed by firing squad in Rostov prison, a death many believed was too quick for his crimes. Charles Manson, Los Angeles. 1969, California was shaken by the brutal murders of actress Sharon Tate and others, carried out by followers of Charles Manson. Manson, a cult leader, convinced his group, known as the Manson family, to kill in hopes of starting a race war he called Helter Skelter. The crimes shocked Hollywood and the world because of their cruelty and the strange devotion of his followers. Although Manson never killed with his own hands, he was found guilty of directing the murders. His strange look, wild speeches, and eerie music connections made him infamous. Sentenced to death in 1971, his punishment was later changed to life when California banned the death penalty. 2017, Manson died in prison at the age of 83, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. Dennis Rader, Kansas. 1974, in Kansas, Dennis Rader began a frightening series of murders that shocked his small community. He called himself BTK, short for bind, torture, kill. Rader was not the kind of man people expected to be a killer. He worked for a home security company, later became a dog catcher, and was even the president of his church council. To neighbors, he looked like a normal family man, living with his wife and children. But in secret, he had a dark desire to control, torture, and kill. Between 1974 and 1991, he murdered 10 people. His very first crime was one of the most brutal. He broke into the Otero family home and killed both parents and 2 of their children. After that, he continued to stalk women and families, tying them up, strangling them, and leaving behind scenes of horror. What made him even more terrifying was his need for attention. He wrote letters to police and newspapers, bragging about the murders and describing the details. He wanted to make sure the world knew BTK was out there. Then, for years, he suddenly went silent, and many believed the killer was gone forever. But in 2004, after more than a decade of hiding, Rader could not resist writing again. He sent letters and even asked police questions, almost like he was playing a game. His biggest mistake was sending a computer disk. Detectives checked the file and found hidden information linking it to his church and even to his own name. In 2005, Dennis Rader was finally arrested. In court, he shocked everyone by calmly describing his murders step by step, without showing any guilt. He admitted how he planned the attacks, how he watched his victims, and how he carried them out. He was sentenced to 10 life terms in prison. Today, Dennis Rader, BTK, remains locked away. Jack Unterweger, Vienna. 1990, in Austria, Jack Unterweger was celebrated as a reformed writer after serving time for a murder. But soon, a new wave of killings revealed his dark truth. Women, often sex workers, were found strangled with their own bras in several European cities and even in the United States. Unterweger used his fame as a journalist to get close to police and crime scenes, pretending to report on the murders he was actually committing. In 1992, he was arrested and put on trial. The evidence showed he had killed at least 9 women. 1994, the night he was sentenced to life, Unterweger was found dead in his prison cell, having hanged himself with a rope made from his shoelaces. His double life, as a respected writer by day and killer by night, ended in final deceit. Carl Panzram, Leavenworth. September 5, 1930, at Leavenworth Prison, Carl Panzram was led to the gallows for his execution. Panzram's life had been one of constant crime and violence. He spent his years drifting across the United States and even parts of Africa, leaving behind a trail of robberies, arsons, assaults, and murders. He admitted to killing at least 21 people, though the real number could have been higher. Unlike many criminals who seek mercy, Panzram openly demanded the death penalty. In letters, he boasted that he felt no guilt and hated humanity itself. His violence continued even in prison, where he beat a worker to death. On the morning of his execution, he remained cold and unrepentant, spitting out bitter last words before the trapdoor opened beneath him. Panzram's hanging ended the life of a man who refused redemption and took pride in his hatred, making him one of the most ruthless figures in American criminal history. Tsutomu Miyazaki, Tokyo. July 1989, police in Tokyo captured Tsutomu Miyazaki after he tried to photograph a young girl in public. This arrest uncovered one of the most disturbing cases in the country's history. Between 1988 and 1989, Miyazaki kidnapped and murdered 4 young girls, all between the ages of 4 and 7. His crimes shocked the nation not only because of the killings but also because of what he did afterward, which included mutilation and other horrific acts. He even sent taunting letters and postcards to the grieving families, increasing their pain. When investigators searched his apartment, they discovered thousands of videotapes filled with horror films, violent anime, and disturbing recordings, which triggered national panic about Japan's growing otaku culture. In 1997, Miyazaki was sentenced to death, and after years of appeals, he was executed by hanging in 2008.